Attributes known by text, not mind. The Shaykh said in As-Sirat al-Mustaqim, know that the scholars say, we believe in confirming what came in the Quran and what came in the authentic hadith, such as al-wajh, al-yad, al-ayn, al-rida, al-ghadab, and other attributes that we're not going to translate, with the meaning that they are attributes whose reality Allah knows, not organs or emotions like our hands, eyes, faces, and anger. Indeed, organs are impossible to be attributes of Allah because of His saying, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, nothing is like Him in any way. And His saying, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, there was never any match for Him. Allah has attributes that do not resemble those of others. Using the same word for Allah and the creatures does not necessitate that the meaning is the same. At-Tahawi said, وَاللَّهُ يَغْضَبُ وَيَرْضَى لَا كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْوَرَى. Allah has the ghadab and the rida, unlike any of mankind. So it's not an emotion of anger and pleasure. Rather, for these attributes that we have mentioned and others that we will mention, we're allowed to say Allah knows what they mean, and then to be silent about any specific meaning other than they are not literal. By saying Allah knows what they mean, we mean to deny the literal meaning or the apparent meaning. And we mean to confirm for them a befitting meaning, even if we don't determine exactly what that alternative explanation is. That's a test from Allah Ta'ala. So it's valid to say His ghadab is an attribute of His in eternity, and His rida is an attribute of His in eternity. And it's permissible to say His ghadab is His will to punish, so it refers to His will. Yani, according to another way, we're saying He has an attribute called will. If that will is related to punishing, it's called ghadab. That's different from the first saying I told you. The other saying is what? Not that it's His will. He has an attribute called will, and He has an attribute called ghadab, and He has an attribute called rida. The Ash'aris are the ones who said He has an attribute of will. Other attributes include nuzul, that's confirmed in the hadith, or you can say the nuzul is the attribute of the angel who comes down. It could be said nuzul is the attribute of Allah, and He knows its reality. And it could be said that the nuzul is the attribute of the angel, and that's especially if what's meant by it is physically relocating from above to below. And other attributes of Allah include al-ityan and al-majid. Those are confirmed in the Quran. Allah says, Atallah. And Allah says, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. So ityan, ata is from ityan. Ata. And ja'a is from majid. They both have the same meaning in the language, which is coming or approaching in a literal sense. And among the meanings of these words, both of them, is doing something. Doing something. So you say, Ata fulanun amran. It would mean so-and-so approached something. That means he did something. Or you say, Ja'a ila amr. He came to an issue, meaning he did something. Actually, here, let's look. I have something for you. Hamza, ta, Yeah. Ityan. Al-Ityan is al-Majid, coming or approaching. So in a literal sense, it means leaving one location for another. And then this is the attribute of bodies. As for Allah's attribute of Ityan, as well as his attribute of Majid, it cannot have the meaning of movement from place to place, since he is not a body. And thus he does not move and is not in a place. We do not translate these terms when they come as attributes of Allah. We simply say the Ityan of Allah or the Majid of Allah. Either we refrain from any explanation while negating the literal meaning, or we explain it in a way that complies with the religion and the language. And we do not say Allah's coming or the approaching of Allah or anything like that, like what Wahhabis say. In terms of the language, it is not necessary that what is described with Ityan would be a body, and if it were, it is still not necessary that this body's Ityan is a movement from place to place. For example, Al-Misbah gives the expression Ata alayhi dahr. Time came upon him, if you translate it literally. Ata alayhi dahr. Time came upon him. It means time wore him out or ruined him. And time is not a body. Yet it was described with Ityan. Therefore, its coming upon one is not a transfer from place to place. Rather, it's Ityan, the Ityan of time is affecting or acting on. Also, Al-Qamus gives the expression Atal Amr. He approached the matter. This means he performed or fulfilled the matter. This is said of one who is a body, yet his Ityan is not a movement from place to place. It is a performance. Even the English word coming has many usages other than relocating. Likewise, Allah's Ityan and Majid is not relocating. Some said it is his act of creating. He says, Allah says, فَأَتَى اللَّهُ بُنْيَانَهُمْ مِنَ الْقَوَاعِدِ فَخَرَّ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّقْفُ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ. Allah ata. So literally it would be saying, Allah came to their construction from the foundations, and the roof fell upon them from above them. This means that he created tremors that destroyed their buildings. Imam Ahmad said about the verse, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Your Lord, Ja'a literally means came. It means his power came. This means the signs of his power, i.e. his creating, and Allah knows best. Then we have some more details about the word eta that are no longer relevant to our discussion. And among his attributes is Jamb, which some said has a meaning more than the self. That means it's among the ma'ani attributes. And Kef, in a literal sense, Kef means a hand. That means just from the wrist, though, from the wrist to the fingers, not the arm. But as an attribute of Allah, of course, does not mean that. And Qadam and Dahik, so we confirm all of that. Qadam in a literal sense means foot. Dahik in a literal sense means laughing or smiling. So, like we said, and like we're going to say, we have two options here. One is to explain exactly what is the alternative meaning, and the other is to not determine exactly what is the alternative meaning, but to deny the literal meaning. That's what personally I prefer usually to do, just to say it and say Allah knows what it means. That's the general way of the Salaf, as you know. Some have included the saq as an attribute and some have not. So some said saq is an attribute of Allah. Some said it's not. Rather, saq is يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ, the day when a saq is exposed. They said it means the hardship of Judgment Day, the calamity or the disaster of Judgment Day, not an attribute of Allah. Had these not been mentioned in the Quran, it would not be permissible to attribute them to Allah. How would you determine that? How would you be able to say Allah has an attribute called Yad? You have no way. So had it not been in the Quran or the authentic Sunnah, it would not be permissible to attribute them to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That is contrary to the 13 attributes. For even if they were not mentioned in the Quran, the sound mind confirms them. Knowing this, anyone who denies any of the 13 attributes, even a new Muslim, would blaspheme, because this person can reach any of those 13 attributes. He can realize them with just his mind. He does not need a text. So denying them is blasphemy. However, if one denies the Yad, Wajh, and Ayn as attributes, he is not a blasphemer unless he knows that they are in the Quran. For one to understand this subject of what to take literally or not properly, for one to properly understand this subject of what to take literally or not, one must know that Al-Quran has verses that are muhkam, decisive, and verses that are mutashabih, ambiguous. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdihi.